Morning, everybody. Nice to see you all.
Good morning.
Senator Carney, Representative Kuhn, and the members of the Judiciary Committee. I am Heidi Sampson, former state rep from Alfred, and I'm the co-lead petitioner for Protect Girls Sports in Maine Ballot Committee, and I'm also the Executive Director of the Maine Education Initiative. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today in support of this important legislation, LD 2239. At its core, this bill is about something simple, reasonable, and deeply rooted in both law and common sense: fairness, safety, and equal opportunity for all students. For more than 50 years, federal law, specifically Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972, has recognized that biological differences between males and females matter in athletics. That recognition is not discrimination. It is the very foundation of equal opportunity for girls and women. This bill reinforces that principle. By ensuring that teams designated for girls are reserved for biological females, we are protecting the integrity of women's sports, sports that generations fought hard for to establish. Without these protections, we risk erasing the very opportunities Title IX was designed to create. The legislation also addresses privacy, another fundamental right. Requiring separate locker rooms, restrooms, and private facilities based on sex is not radical. It is how schools have responsibly operated for decades. These spaces exist for dignity, modesty, and safety, especially for young students navigating vulnerable and formative years. Importantly, this bill does not ignore or exclude anyone. It explicitly provides protections and accommodations for individuals with medically verifiable differences in sex development, consistent with the Americans with Disability Act of 1990. It also ensures alignment with the Maine Human Rights Act, clarifying that reasonable sex-based distinctions in athletics and private spaces are lawful and appropriate. This is a balanced, thoughtful approach. It respects the rights of all students while preserving fairness in competition, safety in physical spaces, and clarity in the law. It also provides a clear enforcement mechanism, ensuring that students who are harmed have a path to seek justice. And just as importantly, it allows times for schools to implement these policies responsibly with the effective date of January 1, 2027. This is not about politics. It is about protecting opportunities for girls, maintaining safe environments for all students, and ensuring Maine's law remains clear, consistent, and fair. So I urge you to support this bill, and I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your testimony. Committee members, any questions? Representative Crusoe.
Thank you. Good to see you, Representative.
You too?
So you're familiar with politics, obviously.
A wee bit.
During your time speaking with the public during this referendum effort, did you find that this was a political question down political lines, party lines? How was your response from people from different political parties?
Actually, it was all across the board. It was interestingly not political. And people were coming and signing petitions and proudly proclaiming what party they were part of, and not necessarily my party. And so I thank them. And we had petition gatherers that were across the political spectrum too.
Can I follow up?
You may.
And what about regionally? I'm
from the
down
southern part of the state.
So was it different down south versus in other parts of the state?
Well, I think up north it was more. Let me just say, in the South, I can speak to that. Obviously, we are much more blue, and I had an awful lot of people coming and traveling distance just to come and sign that were not Republicans.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Additional questions, committee members? Senator Hagan.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. You're part of the Maine Education Initiative, so you've been looking at ways to answer the dropping scores of students in the state of Maine for a number of years. So how do you delineate with this particular issue, sex versus gender?
Well, sex is a biological construct. It is based in science. This XX, XY is
Excuse
trust the
me,
science.
props are not allowed.
Sorry, it just happens to be on my shirt. And so XXXY is at the cellular level. That is unchangeable. And gender is a social construct. It's fluid and is definitely not an unchangeable issue. So sex is the final scientific data-based diagnosis or category, I should say.
Additional questions, committee members? Representative Henderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, Honorable Heidi Sampson. In the past, when we've had this discussion, there has been some concerns that by implementing this type of a policy, that it would demand and require some invasive physical inspections of minors' bodies. Can you speak to that and how this initiative addresses that?
Well, if you read the bill, the language of the bill, it talks about the birth certificate and what's on the birth certificate at birth. What is a child at birth? So there's no, and that needs to be handed into the schools. So that is not, there's no invasive. That's silly. It's just silly. Thank you.
Representative O'Halloran?
Hi, thank you. I just have a simple question. Do you believe that you can respect identity and still acknowledge biology?
Can you respect, you can respect all people, absolutely. There's no disrespect, but we're drawing a line based in science. What is male? What is female? Now, if there are individuals who identify as something other than their biological sex, they can also participate in sports. No one is being deprived of this. And we have had forever co-ed category of sports and interscholastics. Thanks.
Additional questions, committee Representative Crusoe?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you were on the Education Committee for a long time. You understand budgets and what schools go through. I have heard that a viewpoint that, you know, the schools, this would be an undue burden in terms of cost. How would schools create another co-ed or mixed team? Do you have any information? Can you speak to that at all?
We don't have to change anything. We've been doing this. What they have been doing is costing money because they're realigning everything. That is costing money. To just go back to what we've done for decades and decades isn't going to cost any more money.
Meaning what they've done for.
Well, we've
intramurals or-
had male, female, and co-ed sports forever. So it's, I don't know, maybe people have amnesia, but it's simply going back a few years. And that doesn't cost more money. That actually will save us money.
Additional questions, committee members? Representative Sato?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here today,
Thank
Honorable
you.
Sampson. We know that the suicide rates among the trans community and trans youth is much, much higher than that of other groups. And when we hear from the trans community, what we hear is that being able to participate equally in sports and in education lowers that lack of self-worth and lowers that in those instances of suicidal attempts and completion. So you were just speaking of respect. So how would you answer that piece where being able to participate in trans sports is a basic level of respect?
They can do co-ed.
And what if that does not match with their expression and their identity?
It doesn't matter what their identity is. They can still do co-ed.
Follow.
You may.
And what about for schools that cannot afford to provide co-ed teams?
Schools that don't have money to afford sex-based athletics typically do co-ed. That's just reality.
Additional questions, committee members? Representative O'Halloran?
So I'm just trying to, in my own mind, co-ed, I mean, at the schools that my daughters have gone to, like the co-ed teams were intramural. where what we're talking about here today are varsity sports. And I think that schools would struggle to have a third varsity sport. They can barely afford the two that they have. So when you say co-ed sports, are you talking about like intramural sports or other like group sports and stuff like that? You can join in different teams or travel teams and things like that that are
Well,
co-ed.
That's an interesting question. Yeah, intramural sports is what we're primarily talking about. There is nothing in the language of the bill that's specifying varsity sports. It does not even go there. So that's not part of the discussion. What's part of the discussion is the ability to participate in co-ed sports. Now, if there is no sport, for example, there are schools that they don't have a girls' football team. I know girls that play on the
Right.
boys' football team.
Yeah.
That ends up making it somewhat co-ed. But if there are sex-designated athletic programs, if it's interscholastic, if it's varsity, junior varsity, freshman teams, whatever, they will be sex-based. If they don't have a team, they can make it. If they don't have those separate teams, they don't have enough kids, is usually what happens. I coached for decades and decades, so I understand how this works. Then that would be a co-ed. They would have a co-ed program, but it's not at the same competitive level as, say, you take a co-ed team in soccer, which I coached for decades, and you play the varsity boys soccer team. They're totally different levels. And so that's what we're talking about. What a school can do, it's not making anything extra. We've already been doing it. And if they're talking about the lack of funding, it's usually co-ed that they do.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Any additional questions, committee members? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.